But let's get them to tone it down. Let's get them to diminish it. Then we can have doctrinal talks. And from these doctrinal talks, we will then have a union. That was the plan in 1997. It came out in 2001. There was a meeting. There was a 2000 pilgrimage. The 2000 pilgrimage must have been prepared by Greg. The 2000 pilgrimage, the society has 5,000 people walking in Rome, and they see the beauty of the 7 cathedrals, the 7 basilicas, and with the approval of the Pope, they walk in Rome. They meet with Cardinal Hoyos. The 3 bishops have dinner with the Cardinal Hoyos, and the poison begins to set in. And then we have new discussions. Guess what? The society has decided that there must be 4 steps. Guess what they are? First of all, there must be a freeing of the Latin Mass. There must be a lifting of the excommunications. And then only if they fulfill these 2 conditions that we've already talked about 6 years ago in secret, then we will have doctrinal talks, which we discussed with Cardinal Hoyos in 2002, but now is a decision of the General Chapter in 2006. And then we can talk about a practical agreement. But of course, no practical agreement until doctrinal agreement. This is already a slide, because it used to be, we will not be with the modernist Romans until the light of faith shines over Rome again. Then we'll be with the Romans. When the light of faith shines over the Romans again. There's no need for us to have a doctrinal agreement. There's a need for Rome to convert. Notice the essential difference between Rome's conversion and doctrinal agreement. Doctrinal agreement means we have the same ideology. It does not mean that Rome converted. Rome converts means Rome returns to the traditional Catholic teaching. We have doctrinal agreement might mean we change to the new teaching. Or we change halfway to the new teaching, and they change halfway to the old teaching, and we have an agreement. Agreement does not mean conversion. It's already a huge slide from saying from Rome's conversion to doctrinal agreement. That was 2006. And so the slide is continuous, organized. It's not totally disorganized. Then during the course of these years, what happens? Priests who are too independent, priests that are too anti-liberal, priests that are acting like the old SSPX priests used to act, they've got to be removed. Why do they have to be removed? In the old days, for instance, if I wanted to build a school, I just went and built a school. And then when the superior came, he said, "Father, we got to do a school." "Oh, really? Okay, then we can throw some holy water on it." And then if an interviewer came and they wanted to talk, "I want to hear about the history of the Society of St. Pius X," and they talked to the 23-year-old priest who just got ordained last week, "Sure, I'll give you a talk on the Society of St. Pius X. It started by Archbishop Lefebvre, whatever his name is, and we are against the bad guys." And so they would give a talk, and there's no need to ask permission. There was none of that. When I was transferred, when I built a church, I just called Kansas City and I said, "I want to build a $1 million church." And he said, "Okay, Father Scott." And so then Father Scott calls Menzingen. "It's a $1 million church? Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah, about $1 million." So we sent a little drawings and $1.2 million to build the church. "No problem, go ahead and build the church." That was it. Now there's so much red tape you have to go through that you can't do anything. Then they show up and bless it. Bishop shows up and does the cornerstone blessing. Bishop shows up and does a blessing. Bishop shows up and does a consecration. No problem. You want to build a school? You just call up the boss. "I want to build a school." "Okay." And then we build a school. And so we were just doing things. And we had to get permission, but just very simple, basic verbal permission, and that was sufficient. If you spend lots and lots of money, you got to get permission from headquarters, and that was it. It's very simple. So you could operate openly, and you already knew, when you called and asked permission, you already knew that you had the permission. It was just kind of like going through a formality. Now priests can't operate like that anymore. You got to get rid of those priests. Why is it important to get rid of those priests? Because those priests are potentially dangerous. If this priest is a prior, and we change to modernist Rome, this priest may not go along with it. And when you try to throw him out of his priory, you might have a hard time. And he might try to save that church for Catholic tradition. Therefore, remove those priests in each country. And we find priests being removed throughout the country. This has been going on for at least the last 15 years. One at a time. Here and there. You replace them with young priests. Young priests, we've always had young priests in society, but young priests who don't have any gumption, who have no fire, who don't have any desires except for, let's just do my job, do whatever the boss tells me to do, and keep things going, but I don't want any more headaches. Father, you want to say an extra Mass? No, I don't want to say an extra Mass. Father, can you come over here and say Mass for these 10 people in this other chapel? Absolutely not. You're crazy. I've already got 200 people in my chapel. They forget that every one of our chapels started with 7 people. Like St. Isidore's, for instance, in Denver, Colorado. In 1983, I was a pastor there for 11 years. In 1983, there was 7 faithful in the garage of Mr. James Nason. That was the parish. Now they've got a big school, they got a big church, they've got a whole thing, they got a big beautiful complex, they got daily Mass, they got a priory, they got 3 priests. It didn't start off like that. And the young priests forget about that. They don't know that. They don't realize that this is how you spread the faith. You go and say Mass for 5 people. Next thing you know, it becomes 15. Next thing you know, it becomes 150. Next thing you know, one of them wants to be a priest. Next thing you know, he gets ordained. Next thing you know, you've got a priory there. All that is diminishing. You put the new guys in, and so they change it. The faith, then when you change the doctrine, they're also taught new things in the seminary. There's a new doctrine in the seminary. The new doctrine is obey. Confidence in the superiors. The priest is a spiritual man. He is not a man of doctrine, he is a man of spirit. And he must maintain his own personal spirituality. And the most important virtue that God gave is obedience. 2 sides of obedience. You as a good priest must obey your superior. And as a good priest, you must make sure that every single animal you meet is obedient to you. A priest is an obedience machine. He is obedient to those above him, and he smashes those below him. And that's the new attitude. It is a taught attitude. Noblesse oblige. I am noble, it obliges you to obey the noble. That's what happens. So there is a change of doctrine. There is a collapse of the society. And it's every level. That's why Father Jahir says, you can't fix the corruption is like white ants. It's like termites. It's all throughout the wood. It's everywhere inside. You can't just change the boss. Say, wait for Bishop Flay to get reelected. Or someone to take his place. That's not going to fix anything. Because the error is in the apostolicity. It's in the Catholicity. It's in the holiness. It's in the oneness. Can we now say of society priests that every society priest has the same doctrine? Absolutely not. Father Pfeiffer tells me that there's 150 priests in France. 50 of them are staunch liberals. 50 of them are staunch anti-liberals. And 50 could go either way. Whichever side wins. We have priests in France who do marriages with the Novus Ordo priest coming over and doing the marriage. And our priest says the Mass. As if to indicate that our marriages are invalid. An ecumenical service, basically. They're not punished, they're not smashed. Father Giselle, that's how his niece got married. Father Giselle's sister, Father Giselle is with me, his sister's daughter was married with the SSPX priest saying the Mass, who was not her uncle, Father Giselle, and the Novus Ordo indult priest doing the exchange of vows. Father Olonier, in fact, it was. Doing the exchange of vows. Mixing the indulterians and society. This kind of thing should be formally punished in the past. So these corruptions are happening everywhere. And to say that just by waiting and doing an correction. That's not going to fix anything. There are many priests of the Society of St. Pius X who refuse to anoint someone who is not a parishioner. There are priests of the society who say absolutely not should girls be wearing dresses all the time. There are priests of the Society of St. Pius X who are promoting NFP, within bounds, of course. There are priests of the Society of St. Pius X who say you can go to the adult Mass. What's the problem? There are priests of the Society of St. Pius X who say, why are we saying Mass in that town when there's an adult Mass in that town? And you can say, oh, those are hypothetical, those are isolated cases. Well, when you have 500 isolated cases out of 550 possible cases, that's a lot of isolated cases. That's like one of my Mexican parishioners used to say, remember, you're unique, just like everybody else. Yeah, every case is an isolated case. But when you have 5,000 isolated cases, you've got a pattern. You can't just call them, quote-unquote, isolated cases. There are so many of these cases, and they increase every day. And furthermore, not only do they increase, whenever there's a complaint about these cases, nothing's done. Father Toke, for instance, refuses Holy Communion this week. Why wasn't he smashed the next day? The next day, if he had done something so wicked. He was not smashed the next day. He still says he's going to refuse communion to those 6 whom he calls the leaders of putting Father Pfeiffer to come and say Mass there. The wicked act of a disobedient priest saying Mass in a disobedient place, or another disobedient priest saying a disobedient Mass also. It's insanity. Doesn't he realize that he's disobedient to the local bishop? Doesn't he realize that every Mass he says every day is disobedient? He's worse than me because he's pertinacious in his disobedience. He says a disobedient Mass every single day in the same place. I'm traveling. Just saying a couple of disobedient Masses in this diocese. This is craziness. And so so we have a different, the oneness of is damaged and destroyed. There are priests in society who believe that we have to accept Vatican II in the light of tradition. There are priests in society who believe, just as we always used to believe, Vatican II is extremely bad and must be completely thrown out in toto. There are priests in society who believe it's half and half, and so on. All kinds of variety of teaching in the priests of society. The unity of faith isn't there anymore. There are priests in society, for instance, as regards the sacrifice, who don't say the prayers after low Mass. Much of the time. Other priests say it every day. It's one of the scandals in Post Falls. Why is it that they're skipping the prayers after low Mass? Well, it's not part of the Mass, right? It's just a requirement of Pope Leo XIII. And so there are all kinds of changes. Remember this, the liturgy, Oremus pro perfides Judaeis. You know, almost every priest, at least in the English-speaking world, always says Oremus pro perfides Judaeis, from the prayer for the Jews, to pray for the perfidious Jews. And now, you know, they've changed that. Confiteor. Some maybe are changing the Confiteor also. No longer some. I think most are still doing the Confiteor. But we're finding changes. Inconsistencies. One priest is a very strong anti-liberal. Another priest is pro-liberal. Another priest is in between. We have no longer unity in the society. And one of the sure signs is all the talk of unity. We're united. We are one. We are so together. It's just like when you go to a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant and it says good food, don't eat there, because that means they serve garbage. When you go to a restaurant that serves very good food, it says filet mignon, it says the names of the various dishes that are all wonderful. But when it's a bad restaurant, it always says good food. And what does a used car salesman tell you? Trust me. You can trust me. When you hear that, you're in trouble. And what are we talking about now in the new society? You can trust us. Archbishop Lefebvre never said that. And we are united. Never mind the fact that we've kicked out one of the 4 bishops, that the 3 bishops are fighting against the 1 bishop, and we're trying to get them to shift sides, so now it's 2 against 2, and then they finally got Bishop Tissier half on one side, and then Bishop Williamson's thrown out. Well, obviously we're united. And then the priests, 30 of us are thrown out, but of course we're united, and the faithful are united. They're so united in Brisbane that some of them can't go to communion anymore. And we speak of unity, unity, unity. It's blown apart. How did this unity get destroyed? First, there was a destruction of apostolicity. Then there was a destruction of Catholicity. Then there was a destruction of holiness. And then there was a loss of unity. And just by changing bosses and changing paint and putting a new paint job on the society, it won't fix it. There's only 2 ways to fix it, says Father Jair, 76-year-old priest in Brazil. All the priests that are faithful have to get together and throw out all of the bad superiors. Not some of them. Number 2, if they cannot throw them out, then they have to leave and start all over. Exactly like the Franciscans did, like St. Teresa. He said, you must do what St. Teresa did. St. Teresa of Avila. St. Teresa of Avila, the Carmelites have been around for over 1,000 years. She couldn't fix the Carmelites. They were too corrupt. So she had to form another branch of Carmelites following the traditional rule that were completely independent from the corrupted Carmelites. This is the only practical answer to the present crisis of society. And somebody's going to have to wake up and see it. This is the elephant in the living room. What are some priests saying? There's many good priests in society. Of course there's many good priests in society. There's many good faithful. Of course there's many good faithful. But don't forget that there's many good priests in the fraternity of St. Peter. There's many good priests in the diocese. There's many good priests in Rome. There's good faithful everywhere in the world. Many of them, when they die, they're going to go straight to heaven. Whereas many of our people, when they die, they're going to go straight to hell. We are not about good people and bad people, nice people and mean people. We are about the doctrine of the faith. We are about the Catholic Church. And when we see that this organization, called the Society of St. Pius X, is so inundated in all of the 4 elements that make it Catholic, so corrupted in all the 4 elements that make it Catholic, then we have to face that fact. The only way to clean it up is to stand up and say, there's dirt on the wall. Like my brother Bill and his little kids. He says, girls, clean up the floor. And there's toys on the floor, and there's garbage on the floor, and they said, it's fine, I can't see anything. He goes, pick that toy up, and they picked it up. It's all clean now. What's dirty? He goes, that's dirty. Well, okay, is it done now? No, that. No, that. So he has to point out every single toy and every single dust bunny so that they clean it up, because the little girl can't see it. There's no way of cleaning up the SSPX unless an SSPX priest, and an SSPX bishop preferably, stands up and says, no, this is a problem, face it. That's a problem, face it. We have priests that are saying the indult mass is okay, deal with them. We have priests that are doing mixed marriages with indultarians. Smash them, punish them, tell them they can't do that anymore. We got priests that are refusing Holy Communion. We got priests that say the hybrid mass may be tolerable, such as Father Rostam, the superior of the Society of St. Pius X in the United States. He was asked about will you consider accepting the hybrid mass? And he said, well, it's a question of, I don't know, because we don't know what's going to be said, what the hybrid mass is going to be like. It's basically a bunch of rumors. And the important thing is that we get the right to keep the 62 liturgy. Which means the answer is yes, we're willing to consider accepting the hybrid mass. Archbishop Lefebvre says, we refuse all the reforms. Is the hybrid mass a fruit of Vatican II? Yes, okay. No. Next question. But it's very nice. Okay? No. We reject the fruits of Vatican II. Very clear, very precise, our teaching. No more in the Society of St. Pius X. So just by changing out a bishop, changing out a local superior here and there, won't fix the problem. It's trickled all the way to the bottom. Why isn't there a great uproar? If the society was healthy, there would be a great uproar. The fact that there has not been a great uproar means the society is in stage 4 and stage 5 of cancer. Therefore, we have to take action now and resist now. So these 4 marks have been obliterated, they have been damaged, they have been wounded gravely in all the areas and not just one. And it's not a matter of changing out a boss and everything is fixed. Absolutely not. Stand up boldly and publicly and point out the errors. Stand up boldly and publicly and condemn the errors. Stand up boldly and publicly and profess the same truth that we were commanded and taught to profess in our seminaries, at the traditional seminaries of the Society of St. Pius X, as we were formed by our founder, Bishop Lefebvre, and do the exact work that he has done. We continue the work that he has done. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, no need to change. Do what he has done. That's what must be done. And so in any case, it's sufficient there. Anybody have any questions or whatever? We can. Yes.
One question, Father, I've been thinking about. I was listening to the 9. You know, the 9 in.
Yes, 83.
83. There's still. But some of the things they say when you listen now in a lot of sort of events, some of the things they say are interesting to look back on the way that things were back then. Obviously, they've gone extreme to sort of a compass.
Right.
But yeah, what do you think? The Archbishop, with regards to the sacraments, with regards to the Mass, he stuck to the 1960 because, well, he really didn't like it that much. Is the impression I got. He said it's the best we can go back to. That's a unified form that everyone can use.
Right.
But when you really study it, because I've looked into it, a lot of the things that the 62 did, they took out a lot of prayers, like the whole prayers for the blessing of
Palm Sunday.
Palm Sunday. All the things, all the reference to the devil and all these things will be taken. I believe, personally, it was the start of what came after. Because if you look at the way things went in the 60s before the World War came.
Yes.
I really believe that we should go back before the Hollywood was changed, back to, say, the 50s.
54.
Back to Pius X reform, because he did a reform of the breviary and that.
Yes.
Stick to what we know. I mean, it's up to whatever happens.
Well, you know,
because we know it's something that's really sanctifies, it's something that really works.
Yeah, that's true. But also, Archbishop Lefebvre, the policy before that 83 split was basically ad libitum. That was Archbishop Lefebvre's policy before. That if you wanted to do the 54 and before, that's fine. And if you wanted to do the 62, that was fine. The only reason he chose 1962 is that's the last edition of the traditional Mass. Because, you know, there's no changes to the Mass. And there were changes to the secondary things, external things, like the Holy Week, like you say, the Palm Sunday and February the 2nd, and changing out some of the St. Peter feasts. A lot of the Pope feasts were kind of changed, like St. Peter in chains, and the St. Peter at Rome.
St. Joseph, the solemnity of St. Joseph.
St. Joseph was gone and replaced with the May the 1st, the St. Joseph, the worker. And so, I mean, but those changes are not, you can't condemn them as heretical changes.
No.
So his basic argument was this: it's the last missal before grave changes. And it's the last publishing of the Latin Mass, because the 62 liturgy, the 62 missal, is the same liturgy of the last 2,000 years. And so the Mass, for instance, when we say Mass, the missal that I use today is an older missal. Well, it's the same. So we can use a 28 or a 38 or 1827 or a 1962, it's the same. Only time you run into trouble is when you run into Holy Week or like February 2nd or things like that. So the policy before was ad libitum. If we kind of prefer the older way anyway, and if you want to follow it, that's fine, because they're essentially the same. There's no essential difference. There's no essential, particularly no doctrinal difference between the 56 Holy Week and the 54 Holy Week. But there are obvious changes. So it's not like the new Mass in which you have a theological shift. And it's not even like the early 60s where you're bringing in the vernacular and you're saying the canon out loud and you're doing things that are complete violations of tradition. You don't have that in the 62. So you can point to a few instances that the enemies have always pointed to, like for instance the Good Friday. Good Friday is horrific. The new Good Friday of 62. But I mean, basically, it's not enough to condemn it. And therefore, he said, that's it. The only reason he chose 62 is because that's the limit. Just trying to accept, give as positive interpretation as possible of the Church, and take it as far as it can be taken without compromise. That's the only reason for 62. We follow the same same principles. You know, yes.
There's an argument that sedevacantist use along the same lines. The question, put the question to you, is that I understand that the priests of that era, the priests of the Nine, were saying that that we're being accused of being disobedient to Archbishop Lefebvre, because Archbishop Lefebvre said you're going to use the 1962 missal and that's it. But they wanted to use the previous missal for the reasons stated, and I think there were good reasons for saying what they did. But I think obedience got caught up in that, and then later on came the problem with the Pope. They wouldn't accept what...
Well, I think the papal thing was there from the beginning. Like apparently one of the priests said, no, I don't mess up which correct name, you know, is that it was known that I was a sedevacantist when I went to the seminary. And, you know, that was one of the priests that signed, one of the priests who signed the document in 1984, I won't say his name, but he was one of the priests who later joined the Nine, and he says, you know, I took a vow that I accept the Pope as the Pope, but I only did that because they forced me to do it, or else I wouldn't be ordained a priest, and it was known that I was a sedevacantist before I went to the seminary. So obviously that's not a cop-out, right? If you take a vow in front of the tabernacle, you accept the Pope as a Pope, and you're lying, that's called the sacrilege, right? See, if they're not going to ordain you because of that, well then you have to stand for what you believe is the truth and not be ordained. If you lie in order to get ordained, well that's obviously a sin, sacrilege. Remember, there's a couple things to remember about the Nine. In the case of the Nine in the United States, there's some unique elements. One of them is, during the 70s, they put the names of the properties in their own personal names. They legally prepared a split before it happened, years in advance. This is the proof that they were looking for the day and the excuse that they could break away. When they did break away, they took the properties with them. Two places where there was a massive disaster that was never fixed was New York City and Cincinnati, Ohio. We've never recovered in those two places. Our headquarters in the Northeast was New York City, basically just outside of New York City in Long Island, and Nassau County. And in Cincinnati, Ohio was our largest parish of the society at that time. A big school, St. Gertrude's, and a parish. It all was taken by them. We never got the properties back. We lost our largest parish, and we lost, St. Mary's, Kansas later on became the largest parish, but we lost our largest parish, we lost our largest school, we lost our headquarters, we lost all these properties because they had prepared legally for it in advance. Secondly, they're sedevacantists. They were sedevacantists, most of them. And then thirdly, the disobedience was a specific disobedience about Father Collins, I believe it was, who was assigned to be stationed in St. Mary's, Kansas. They weren't forbidden to offer the old liturgy. In St. Mary's, Kansas, Father was assigned to St. Mary's, Kansas, and when he went there, he said, I refuse to go there, because that's the district of Father Boldick, and he says 62 liturgy, I won't go there. Bishop Farshid said, no, you're a newly ordained priest, just got ordained in May, you're going to go to your assignment. He refused. When he refused, then the priests of the Northeast District, Father Sanborn, for instance, who was superior, Father Kelly, who was a superior, and Father Sanborn, who was the rector of the seminary, they united behind the priests, and that became the occasion of the May split of '83. And then it escalated to property battles, and, sedevacantist battles, and, but it was an act of disobedience, refusing to go to an assignment. And this refusal was used as an occasion rather than a cause to achieve something they were after anyway, which is the taking of the properties, the hijacking of the society, and they did it. They were the only departure where they took the properties, took the parishes, and it was well prepared in advance. They took Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre to court. They mocked him and dressed him down in the courtroom. So, and then, of course, the sedevacantist issue was in the Roman Catholic magazine, which was at that time was a Catholic Society magazine, in many articles there talking about the Pope, the papacy, and the sedevacantists, and so on. So there's no comparison between that event and any other departure in the history of the society. So, you know, there's big, big differences, you know. And whereas in this case, what we're dealing with is the SSPX is departing. The superiors are departing. They're no longer teaching what our fathers taught us. Bishop Fillet is speaking like Dom Gerard. He's speaking like Father Vizik, two priests that left the society. He is not speaking like our Jerusalem. Anything else there? Maybe we can close. Okay, we'll go ahead and say it for a minute. Okay. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost. As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Same as in Pfeiffer, St. Jude, St. Victory, St. Sorrows, Christians, Ignatius,